Hi, my name is Myndalynn Word, and I'm a member of Impressions. I'm a senior, and I will be graduating in 2021. I'm going to be reading The Capitalist by Jon Gillooly. This was published in our 1999-2000 edition of Impressions, and John graduated in 2001. The woman's presence radiated contempt, just as her jewelry radiated wealth of the greatest magnitude. Ropes of diamonds and pearls hung from her neck, and her jet-black dress slinked to the ground in the imitation of a writhing snake. Her name was Gloria Radcliffe, and the object of her contempt had presently entered from the only door in the tower room. This tower, which was connected to her monstrously large country manor, was where she housed her library. It gave her a feeling of power to be cradled in a sea of knowledge as she gazed out at the country below. It was a marvelous feeling, a simply divine feeling, and so, naturally, this is where she came when she needed to iron out all the difficulties that life assailed her with. She was currently in need of a first-class iron. The man was of the liberal professor type, and betrayed his fright by way of palms dripping with sweat and face as pale as ivory. Ivory is a comparison far too classy to be used on one such as before me, thought Gloria. This was a face that reminded her of tapioca pudding, completely devoid of shape. The fire crackling in soothing tones, but the sound of the man's gasp as he tried to recover from the climb up the stairs drowned out those tones, just as the reunion of the Red Sea drowned out the army of a particular pharaoh. She turned away in disgust, her eyes skipping over the various volumes in the hard-bound leather that encircled the tower room. The eyes came to rest on the works of Kant. The glittering, gold-imprinted title calmed the revulsion that burned in her throat. There is nothing like a gold-imprinted book, she thought. While others settle for filthy, torn paperbacks such as the man before me, I can't bear to have anything less than the finest. But isn't this true in all things? Pondered the magnificent aristocrat. Involved in categorical imperative, I see, said the man. Evidently his nervousness had been dispelled. The categorical what? Gloria asked, irritable, for she was enjoying her arrogant little thoughts. Kant's categorical imperative, bumbled the man, quite unaware of any ill will aimed in his direction. Basically, the idea of it is that every action you perform should be performed on the basis of what would happen if everyone in the world were to perform that very same action. His cheeks waddled to and fro as he became more and more excited over his performance. Gloria thought she heard the gobble of a turkey. For instance, take lying. If everyone were to lie, then there wouldn't be any point in communicating. Therefore, it shouldn't be practiced. Or, take... Gloria gazed at the book with a complete loss of respect. How dreadful that such a beautiful book could be full of such foolishness. Professor Bindle, she said crisply, I find it nothing less than mournful that a man of your learning would become worked up over such a pathetic philosophy as this. I mean, really, do you honestly want everyone to be judged on the same level? The trash known as the welfare recipients on level with me? They already rob me of half my income, and Kant, and no doubt you, want to rob me of my stature as well. You dreadful little man, of course I use little for sole dramatic effect. The only thing imperative about this theory is that it not be brought up in your environmental lectures. Is that as clear as the crystal in my kitchen? Alliterations had a way of accenting her sarcasm. Well, if it offends you so much, why have it in your library? Gobbled the turkey, her eyes dilated like a serpent getting ready to strike. I love Das Kapital in my library, you hypocrite, not because I like it, but because I often run out of firewood. With that she snatched the gold-printed work of Kant off the shelf and sent it sailing into the flames. She glared around for Das Kapital, but didn't know where it was residing. Mrs. Radcliffe, stammered the professor, I've been sent again because the animal rights group is changing its mind about not protesting at the big party tonight. They think it's just too good a chance to pass up for picketing, seeing as how you, who are president of a fur company, are the guest of honor. Gloria gasped in horror at the implications of this statement. The very idea of a band of protesters holding up pictures of slaughtered animals at what was to be the social climax of the year would send her stock plummeting to the levels of Jocelyn Elder's mind. Every news camera in the country would have it on film. Lighting a cigarette and deeply inhaling, she turned and said, Professor, I pay you a fortune precisely to avoid these disasters. If the press, that band of jackals, gets wind of this Radcliffe furs, we'll never recover. Now, can't you pacify them with a speech in a cave or under the trees, or whatever it is those troglodytes congregate? Speeches won't work this time. You're too ripe and vulnerable not to be noticed. However, I was told to tell you that $100,000 would stop the protest. Apparently, a protest in the Congo is being planned, and the group is short of funds," the professor excitedly said. "Just 100,000?" asked Gloria. "How meek, how modest, how dreadfully humble! Why not ask for the Hope Diamond wrapped in the Shroud of Turin?" She spotted Das Capital and sent it flying into the flames to join Kant. The board would do a cartwheel if they knew what she was about to do. But the board was acting highly suspicious and secretive of late. She could no longer rely on them. "Very well," she said, scrawling off a check and handing it to him. Greedily he snatched it up, telling her what a wise move she was making. He then hurried away down the steps. Part 2. Every year a Wall Street tycoon, Vincent, the dollar greenback, held the party of all parties in his mansion. One got in only by being very famous or very rich. Gloria stood with Vincent at the door greeting the guest, as the guest of honor was required to do. A more eccentric group was never before gathered. It was a People's Magazine fantasy with red carpet rolled from the door to the curb, lined with giant sparklers to keep the mob at bay. Paparazzi were going ecstatic, snapping pictures of everything that blinked and many things that didn't. The guests looked ethereal as they floated inside. The centerpiece was a giant ice swan carved from frozen vermouth and sitting in a pool of vodka. Hands down, it was the largest martini ever made, and the head chef viewed it with intense paternal affection. Great reams of Chinese silk hung from the walls and the ceiling, the fans behind them causing the silk to pulsate like a great throbbing heart. The floor to Gloria's horror was one great mirror with the various lights reflecting from it. "My God, it's Clockwork Orange!" she cried, pulling her absolutely simple white mink coat tightly around her to avoid any compromising postures. A band played "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds," as a voice beside her scathingly said, "Completely devoid of taste, don't you think?" Turning, she saw Oscar Swift, critic for the New Yorker, handing her a dangerously large martini. "Oscar, it's divine to see you. That piece of satire you wrote on Greenpeace was absolutely genius. I had it framed." "Well, my dear," replied Oscar, his eyes dancing across the crowd in complete judgment, "they seem to have taken Wilde's quote seriously. One's first duty in life is to be as artificial as possible. Everyone needs a little wake-up call every now and again." "That's the gospel truth," said Gloria. "I just wish you would go after that nasty animal rights group also. They've dragged me through the ninth circle of Dante's hell, accusing Radcliffe Firs of torturing animals and raping the forest of all God's creatures. It is completely useless to tell them that due to our breeding farm we don't have anything to do with God's creatures. We make our own." "My dear girl," began Oscar, "you must realize that since they all kneel at the formaldaic residence of Lenin, you are their sworn nemesis. After all, if every capitalist were like you, their philosophy would trip harder than Mr. Quail. It is therefore necessary to harass you until you are destroyed." "You're not serious," exclaimed Gloria, clutching her throat in mock horror. "If I were any more serious, I should like to die," said Oscar. "But seeing as I am far too busy to play on the harp, let us change the subject to a more jocular matter, that is to say, the taste of our host. Surely you're wondering why the Matisses have come down and the silk has gone up? Well, evidently he has found quite the romance, heroine. He's monstrously addicted." "Impossible," said Gloria, with a dismissing wave of her hand. "You might as well tell me Castro is waiting to play footsie. A Goldwater Republican such as Vincent is far too sensible." "Actually," said Oscar, "well, I won't go there. But I assure, oh, ye of little faith, that the rapture awaits you if you but enter the lounge." He turned his gaze to the far end of the hall, where the lounge doors were draped in reams of Chinese silk upon which was a great painted dragon. "There you will find a plethora of movie stars, Vincent, and most of your board members." "But why?" cried Gloria. Oscar Swift shrugged. "Who's Gertrude Stein?" Gloria broke into the lounge, and there More stone than the women of the Old Testament were her fat cat board members, a herd of actors or environmentalists, and Vincent, the dollar greenback, dressed in a kimono at the moment he was not in touch with the earth. Gloria, said a board member in a lackadaisical tone, as she had ever heard, we have been convinced by these wise people here that we have come across as murderers who deprive the planet of its creatures. Therefore, we have voted to make one half of all clothing imitation fur, so as to appease the environmentalists. Visions of torn paperback books entered her mind. Radcliffe was to furs what Tiffany was to glass. It was equivalent to Tiffany's making one half of its products with plastic. Let me try and understand what you're saying, she said quietly, the rage threatening to burst out of her like a locomotive. You are suggesting that we sacrifice quality, class, and productivity solely to win a popularity contest? Absolutely out of the question. I'll die before I let it happen. I realize it's difficult for some crack-headed, tree-groping, let-the-great-mother-wash-all-over-me environmental high school graduate to understand that when you breed your own animals, you are creating something that wasn't there before. But the fact that you have fallen for it as well astonishes me. No, 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 no. Try it, and you will all be cooking French fries for your next profession. Mrs. Radcliffe, you know that's not within your power, so act reasonably. You are clearly outvoted here. Conform with us. She leaped for the board member, grabbing him by the collar. You listen to me, you addict, she hissed. You will not destroy my father's company. Riveting, mesmerizing, perhaps even otherworldly, Vincent had returned to earth. I just love emotional people. Sometimes I think they're the only real people who exist. Wasn't Nietzsche big on emotions? I could swear by these grapes I'm eating with Nietzsche said to reject anything that didn't spring from the emotions. But where have my manners gone to? Not offering you some of these grapes, Gloria. Have some. They're laced with the most fabulous narcotic and come straight from the land of God. Before the locomotive of fury could come roaring out of her, the environmentalists sprang up with the passion of a group of predators and sloshed buckets of red paint all over Gloria's simple white mink coat while screaming, "Murderer!" Gloria looked like a bleeding animal as she stood there dripping. There was only one thing to do. She went into a dead faint. When she regained consciousness, she found that she was glued to the floor. "Oh, but this is the ideal," she hissed, and ripped herself off the floor with a scream. She spotted Vincent, passed out on the couch, syringe in hand, and flung him to the floor. "Where are they? I'll sue them for defamation, slander, and assault." "They've gone to free the animals. Then afterwards they're going to be with the spirit in the sky," sang Vincent. "Could you bring me a double gin and tonic, without the tonic?" She gave him a look of pity and raced out of the room. They were going to ruin her. The protesters dived out of the way as she plowed her Rolls-Royce through the mob, entering the control center of Radcliffe Firs. She saw on the monitors a dozen people unlocking every cage in the building. The animals were running everywhere, and if they broke free of the building, it would mean financial ruin. Gloria flipped on the intercom. The rage had been extinguished by the paint. The only thing left was cold, calculating reason. "I'm here to enlighten all concerned that you are about to be stopped. When you ignore the laws of this capitalist society, you sink into the mire of oppression and anarchy. I've tried to work with the animal rights group, and they have deliberately and unethically broken our agreement. My board members became traitors, polluting their minds and bodies while attempting to destroy my company. They have painfully demonstrated that they are no longer competent to serve. I was humiliated and assaulted, and this will not be tolerated. By basing your ethics on what others think rather than on what you know to be true, you create a world of anti-reason, and you are no better than lemmings. You will fail to see the cliffs in the near future. The animals will not escape, for I still hold the gas button used to put the animals to death. And in harmony with Kant's philosophy, I decided that what would be good for one of you will be good for all of you. When you awaken, you will all be in a horrible, cold, wet jail cell. But until then, sweet dreams." She pressed the button.